Hello, I'm Noah Payne, and I decided to write my thesis on book banning. 4,448. That is the number of book banning reports in the last 10 years in the United States according to the American Library Association. Book banning has historically been an issue affecting our world. Book censorship was first documented in 1637 in Massachusetts. Book banning continued through the 1900s due to topics like interracial marriage and religion. This issue continues to this day. There is a debate about whether books should be removed from public libraries. Some people believe because they disagree with the content of a book, it should be banned for everyone. While others believe that individuals should be able to decide for themselves what they read. Both sides can agree the amount of books that are being banned is rapidly increasing. As book banning becomes more frequent, a change must be made. This thesis explores the issue of the censorship that occur in public libraries. This thesis investigates the effect on individuals, society, and finally, libraries themselves. Book banning has a negative impact on individuals. It harms youth mental health, prohibits inclusion of diverse people, and damages authors' careers. Secondly, book banning has a harmful effect on society. Book censorship restricts information, stifles progression, and polarizes communities. Finally, book banning has a detrimental effect on libraries. It threatens their stability, allows unqualified people to make decisions, and waste resources. This thesis addresses concerns that people with book censorship have. Those people believe that by banning books, they are protecting children. However, this thesis shows that children are being harmed instead. Book banners believe that parents have the right to choose what their child reads. While it is true that parents should be able to choose what their child reads, they do not have the right to restrict books for everyone. People for book censorship believe that by banning books, they are preventing the spread of negative worldviews. This thesis explores the faults of that thinking. This thesis has proven that book censorship is harmful and must be stopped. It explores the ways that we can keep books in public libraries. Book banning can be prevented on a national level, a local level, and an individual level. We must join together to defeat censorship and keep books available for everyone. I'm ready to be judged.
Yes, it's a good, well-written paper there, Noah. So I wonder, you say on page 6, banning books causes arguments in previously peaceful populations. Censorship creates unneeded conflict, which can easily be avoided. So I guess one thing I wonder is, do you think that every worldview is equally valid and equally deserving of being expressed? And that being the case, do you think that it's possible that some worldviews that are written, that maybe the very fact that it has been brought into existence is what might be causing some of the division, rather than people reacting against what was written?
Yes, sometimes the worldview may be causing it, but as said in the paper, every worldview has a chance to exist. It doesn't matter if you think that it's wrong. If some people can believe that, for example, some people can believe that Christianity is wrong, it still has the right to exist. Some people can believe that Satanism is wrong. Both those religions can coexist. When books are banned and stuff, book censorship, people begin arguing about that, which causes unneeded conflict, as I wrote in the paper. That conflict may never have existed either way. These people may just peacefully coexist. It just aggravates people that otherwise may not have been arguing about that.
Everything about this story, or about this thesis, to me it comes down to spectrum and morality. Spectrum because there is absolute right and absolute wrong, and then everything in between. Same with morality. There is, this is right, this is wrong, and on both sides of this, you have people believing in something that is right. They're not A to B, like in book banning. You have, I believe that protecting our kids or our public is a moral absolute that we must uphold. And on the other hand of that, the opposite side of that is, no, I don't believe that. And that's not really what the argument is. The argument is, I believe that information should be available to everyone and it should not be banned because of content. So they don't really relate, but that's where we have this argument. So the biggest issue that I had with the paper in looking at how how it was supposed to be written and is understanding the opposition, understanding why people are banning books. And so in The Art of War, it says, if you know your enemy, you know yourself. You need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not your enemy, every victory gained will also suffer a defeat. And I think that the reason I brought that up is that in order to truly understand and make sure that you have made a good choice, that you're in the right area, is that you truly have to understand where your enemy's coming from. So do you feel like you have, or you gained a good understanding of where your enemy's coming from and why they want to ban books or why they want to ban content from libraries?
Yes, I started this paper kind of thinking like they're the bad guys. Like the other side, they're evil, they want to restrict all this information just because they don't like information. Like I didn't fully understand that. And then the more as I looked into it, I kind of see their point more. I still don't agree with it, but I kind of see where they're coming from. They just want to protect people. They want to, whether it's kids, whether it's themselves, sometimes negative ideology, sometimes it's like diverse viewpoints they might not agree with. Like I see where they're coming from more throughout this paper.
I'm debating whether or not I want to pull out this gun yet, but I'm going to. Yeah. Do you believe that a Playboy magazine should be in a children's library?
No, that's why we have different sections.
Okay.
I'm not saying that a Playboy magazine shouldn't be in a library at all. I believe that if something belongs, for example, in a teen section, it can be in a teen section. If something belongs in a children's section, it should be in a children's section.
When you say belongs, who makes that decision?
The content, the librarian, sometimes there's a committee board, people who have actually done their research. Unlike book banners who most of the time are just going off of what they believe. Sometimes their religion, sometimes their morality. Not everyone agrees with that.
So if I'm on a committee and I'm looking at a Playboy magazine and whether or not it should go in a children's library, and I decide not to, am I now a book banner? Or who makes the distinction? Who labels me a book banner and by what criteria?
A book banner is someone, for example, let's say in a library there's a children's section, a teen section, adult section, correct? Mm-hmm. That's in general libraries. If someone were to say, I want this Playboy magazine out of this children's section, and they want to place it in the adult section or the teen section, that's different than just outright banning the book. That's moving its section, that's restricting it technically. That's not outright banning it or censoring it. You're moving it out of the section that you do not think it belongs in.
Okay, so one of the, so if it is, let's say a Playboy magazine that we're going to put in the teen section because teens obviously know what sex is, now we have to determine whether or not it's appropriate to be in there. Who makes that decision and why?
The library board, the librarians, the committee people, a teen librarian, people that understand their audience.
Now, if a teenager comes in and decides, no, I think it needs to be in there, and if you don't put it in there and you're restricting the content from me, then I disagree with you, therefore I'm saying you're banning books. Let's protest. So when I mentioned that there's a spectrum here, is that should we be on the complete moral concept that book banning should not be allowed, or should we be on the complete other side of all information should be available to anyone at any time, anywhere? Or where is that spectrum in the middle? Where do you fall? And does it really even matter where you fall in regards to how everyone else falls in the world?
I mean, it doesn't really matter that much how much an individual falls. It's more of just the thing of the committee. Like, I believe that information should be available, but I also believe that the children's thing, if books should be in the section they belong in. That's why I didn't include school libraries in this, because a lot of the time the issue with school libraries, the book's in the wrong section. For public libraries, they're a lot better with the section. Sometimes they're wrong, but then they fix it.
So you're not here. You're not all the way on the other end of the spectrum that all book banning is wrong.
I think banning a book from a library entirely is wrong, but if you're just moving its section, that's not really book banning. That's just moving its section. That's a different thing.
Okay. What about the little kid who's walking along in a library in not the children's section, but just walking around generally in a library and sees that content there? Do we need to restrict children from being in just general parts of adult literature, or where's the line there?
No, we don't need to restrict them from being in general parts of adult literature because, for example, let's say there's a child and they're in a grocery store or just a general store in general. They might see something that is deemed inappropriate for kids. We shouldn't ban them from that grocery store or that part. That's more of a parental thing. If you don't want your kid to see a certain thing, just don't take them to that area of the library or the area of the store.
Okay.
Let me echo, though, I also thought your paper was well written. The form and the flow was exceptional. Your introductory paragraph, I made a note there that you involved not just the mind and the thesis statement, all of a sudden our heart and our emotions got into it by the pictures you were putting there. And I like the definitions that you clarified, book banning from prohibiting from censorship. And there were a couple other points in here that I thought were advantageous. I want to give you a real life scenario, and I want you to tell me if what I did was right or wrong, or if my motivation was right or wrong. And I'll set this up by saying you're not going to find a more conservative, Bible-believing evangelical than me, okay? Nazis banned books, fundamental evangelicals banned books. A few years ago, sitting there and just watching the news, and somebody decided they were going to cancel and they were going to stop printing certain Dr. Seuss books. One of them was because there was an olive-skinned man with a turban on. I read Dr. Seuss books to all my kids. As soon as I heard that in the news, I went to every bookstore until I found that book, and I bought that book because I wanted to have it because they were telling me nobody else was going to have it. Was my motivation right or wrong? And if what I did was right or wrong?
Your motivation was right. What you did was right, because as I stated in the thesis, some people may believe that book is wrong. And to them, they can stop reading that book. They can tell their kids not to read that book. That doesn't mean that they have the right to have it stop being printed or have it stop being removed. You buying that book because you wanted to have the book that's a good thing to do. If you want to have the book, then you can have the book.
I'm also hoping it'll be worth some money someday. that was my ulterior motive, but we're not going to discuss that. I like when you got down to the other part of the paper, you took it out, and I like the way you defined public school and public library, school library just a moment ago. You looked at the greater impact on society. In my educational, what I taught for 20 years was American government economics. And the part of removing books and the damage that it has actually on the democratic process. When you looked at the greater scheme of how different views are removed in your thinking process, was there anything that said, this really, by removing this really hurts the bigger picture of what a free society ought to look like?
Yes. Especially in my section where I talked about individuals. There are many points where I brought examples of individuals losing people that look like themselves. And due to that, this could cause a more limited viewpoint for everyone around. If you've never met a certain group of people, and you see that certain group of people in the book, you might feel more empathy for them, you might understand them more, you're more likely, like the negative viewpoints thing also. If you think Nazi might be good and you read the Hitler book, I don't remember the name of it, then you might change your viewpoints. You might realize that's a negative thing.
So you believe that Mein Kampf should still be published?
Yes, it's bad. I don't agree with anything in it, but if someone wants to read that to be able to understand Hitler or the Nazis or whatever, then they can.
So, and you know, I wrote Mein Kampf down in the margin here also. I wasn't going to bring in the Nazi thing, but then I got to page 11 and you did, so I was like, well, okay. You know, there's a law called Godwin's Law that says the longer a online discussion forum goes, the probability of Nazis being mentioned approaches 1. So anyway, so here we are. But you know, the thing with Mein Kampf is that you know, you say even though we can all agree that topics like Nazis, slavery, and discrimination are negative parts of our history, they're important to read about so that we can learn to not repeat them. Germany does not agree with that. As a matter of fact, you know, it is basically outlawed to speak about Nazism in any positive way whatsoever. I mean, they're very careful about how the Holocaust and everything is allowed to be discussed. And of course, that's debatable whether that's a good idea or not. But what is historically true is that, you know, Hitler was writing Mein Kampf when he was in prison for treason, you know, because of a failed coup attempt that he had. And the ideas expressed in Mein Kampf, you know, that book had a large part in what then became the Holocaust in Nazi Germany. And so, yes, we can read it now and to try to say, well, you know, this is where Hitler went wrong, but the people that were reading it when it was initially published were reading it and saying this is right, so much so that, you know, the entire nation was swept away and the world went to war over it. So, you know, I do wonder if maybe there is some realm somewhere of things that are so egregious and so counter to what culture has said is good and proper for millennia, that it's just a worldview that's not worthy of being published and being suppressed. So, I mean, what do you think about that?
I think that every worldview, whether it's just outright completely negative, has the right to be looked at and viewed by anyone who wants to view it. Whether it's in a book, whether it's on the internet, wherever it is, you shouldn't be able to remove something just because you disagree with it.
Even if enough people agree with it that we end up with World War III?
Yes.
Okay.
What if I decide to write a book about how to conduct a school shooting and wanted to put it in a school library? Should it be there?
First of all, I didn't discuss school library, I discussed public libraries.
Okay.
But if someone wanted to put that in a public library, first of all, I don't know if I touched on this in the paper, but librarians have the right to choose what book they want to buy. If a librarian says, I don't want to buy the book about school shooting, then they don't have to. But if a different librarian decides they want to, and then someone else wants to remove it, then the librarian already chose for it to be there.
So a librarian censoring is okay, as long as you're a librarian.
If you decide to purchase a book for a library, and you decide that you don't want to buy it, then if you're qualified enough, then that's okay. If you want to take it out, then that's a whole different thing. Once it's in there, it's in there.
By the way, you're the one person out of here that doesn't know me yet, so I know your blood's boiling a little bit. So just know that I'm challenging you because I'm supposed to,
Yeah, I
and
know,
not
I know.
because am trying to make you
Yeah,
mad.
I know. I listened to what you said to everyone else.
Okay, so there's an interesting line in here on page 11 that said, everyone can agree that these types of books should not be promoted. My question is do you feel like you are in some part agreeing to censorship?
No. By promote, I mean, if you're saying that being a Nazi is good and awesome and you should do that, that's promoting. If a book is in a library and you're saying, that's a book, that's there, if you want to, you can read it, that's different. If someone were to go in a library and they were to announce to the whole world that being a Nazi is so cool and I love it and you should do it too, that would be wrong. But if you write a book and it gets published and it gets put in the library, then that's different. You're not saying being a Nazi is so cool. You're saying this is a book. If you want to read it, you can. You can agree or disagree.
Well, can I ask you something about the mechanism that you talk about on page 3? You say that action must be taken to stop book banning. At the local level, libraries can form committees of qualified individuals to objectively judge or review challenged books. These committees should be composed of both librarians and community members. And so are you saying then that the outcome is if that committee decides that the book should not be in the library, that then it shouldn't be in the library?
Technically, yes, that is what would happen.
Okay.
I believe that is wrong. That is still censorship. If a committee decides that a book shouldn't be in the library, that's still censorship, and that's happening more and more.
So the question then I would have is you seem to be putting that forth as like a possible solution to at least move the needle towards where you want it. I mean, that's not exactly where you want to be, but you're moving the needle that direction. How does that differ from what the current situation is? I mean, there's not just one individual deciding whether a book goes in there or not. I mean, some of these books are being debated on the Senate floor, for crying out loud. So how does this solution differ from whether books are in there now or not?
This differs because it's qualified people. In general, even in the Senate, there's a lot of unqualified people arguing about whether a book should be banned. They don't have degrees. They're not even like community members that might know a lot about this. They're just random people that have no relation to book banning at all, or books.
And so if we put the determination of what books should be in a library or should not solely in the hands of a single class of people, educated, whatever you want to say, 4-year, 6-year degree holding people or what have you, do you think that's going to then impact the type of books that are going to be allowed or not?
Yes, because those people, most of the time, in general, librarians, they believe that information should not be restricted. There's probably some librarians in the world's pretty big, that disagree and think that books should be banned. But most librarians have pretty good morals. They believe that information should not be banned. And the committee isn't completely made up of librarians either. It's made up of community members, some of which are random people, but they're random people that know a lot about the topic. They might not have a degree in this, but they know what they're doing.
Do you feel like there's an issue where if the list of qualified people are focused on maybe making sure some of the more liberal books are being published, do you see an issue with them potentially choosing to not buy books like The Art of the Deal by Donald J. Trump? Do you feel like there's a possibility that just because we're moving toward allowing more liberal books that we may be doing the very same thing on more conservative books?
I believe that a good committee or a good library should, regardless of political view, regardless of how they feel about a person, should buy like an even number of books. If they decide and they don't want to, then that's not great. They probably should be banning it, but
I think the biggest challenge is, like, we see it in all areas of content, from streaming platforms, and it's the same issue, is when you place a group of people in charge of what content gets published or what content gets displayed or what content's available for consumption, if that group of people tends to lean more conservative or liberal, then you're going to see that reflected in the choices of content that are allowed to be there. So it's not the public that's banning or censoring books, it's the exact committee that you're talking about. It's the committee of people that are responsible for choosing what books we buy, what books we don't buy, and how do we keep that from leaning whichever direction that group tends to lead.
first of all, you try to get people that won't let their politics interfere with how they buy books or how they censor books or whatever. You try to get people that either an even number of conservative or liberal leaning people, or people that are just either way, but don't let their politics define what they do in this committee.
So there was a long-standing rule in radio that when it came to talk radio, as many hours as were dedicated to what people would perceive as liberal talking heads, then the same amount of hours needed to be devoted to conservative talking heads. Now, during the days when, liberal radio was basically all there was, I don't think people, said much about it. But then, of course, along came Rush Limbaugh, and, it was a enormous shift, nobody listened. I mean, the liberal stuff was there, but nobody listened to it. Everybody listened to Rush Limbaugh. His listener audience was enormous. And so do you think that, I think you alluded to it a moment ago, do you think that some legislation that dictates, that for a library to be, it has to have a even divide of conservative leaning versus liberal leaning material, or whatever other criteria you can think of, religious versus secular or whatever? Do you think that some legislation that directs libraries to have a broad and even distribution of the viewpoints would be beneficial?
Maybe. I haven't really thought about that much yet. The only flaw I'm seeing right now is, in general, people don't want politicians or legislation messing with their libraries. Because that law, well, right now it sounds pretty good. It could easily be manipulated or changed into a much worse version of itself.
If I'm of the opinion that I don't want a book that promotes transgender in a children's library, which is a topic for today because a large portion of that lobby thinks that that is an appropriate topic for children. Am I wrong to request that not be in a children's library or even in a children's section? Am I wrong to try to get that removed from a children's section based on how I feel?
No. That is, I discussed this when I did an interview with the library director of the Sterling Library, Jamie Eustace. Mm-hmm. She said that if someone believes that, they can come to that library's committee and tell them that they would like that book to be removed from that section and placed in a different section. And a lot of the time, they'll give that fair consideration and they might do it.
So, but that lobby of the transgender groups that would think that is a children's issue, they would consider that incorrect. They would consider that, based on their morality and what they believe to be right and wrong, they believe that any intervention in removing that type of literature from children would, just like what your paper shows, harm them by removing the information, by making that one child that feels that they are trapped in the wrong identity, it'll make them feel excluded by not feeling like there's other people like them. So how do you answer the question of removing things or placing it in the right section when it comes to morality, when people obviously have very different views of what is right and wrong?
So first of all, let's say we remove a book about trans people and we put that in the teen section or the adult section, whatever, from the children's section. Then let's say they're parents of the people that believe that that is something that they should learn about. Then you, who disagrees with that, your kids, or you don't have to see that in the children's section. But if someone's parents or whatever, if they want them to see that, then they still have the chance. They can still do that. You're not removing it from everyone. You're just removing it from the section that your child might be in.
I think one of the challenging aspects is that if you live in New York or California or, even Austin, then those things kind of become evident. But with a lot of the concern here is that in Vidor, Texas, where it's almost completely conservative with just a few outlying liberal people, that committee is going to most likely be consisted of an all conservative committee, which would promote, in effect, book banning, because they're represented by their community, and their community doesn't want that type of information in there. So how do you keep from conservative communities that are, how do you keep them from banning books by being on that committee?
I believe that those types of people should to be able to be put on that committee. First of all, the librarians decide who gets put on that committee. The librarians, no matter what they believe, they should put people on there that are going to not do it based off their beliefs, liberal or conservative. That they should just do it based on like an even amount, or just make it balanced. Don't just ban a book because you don't like it because it's a liberal or a trans or whatever. Ban it because just don't ban it, honestly. But
That's time. Do we have any final questions?
Sorry, we didn't.
I'll say this, Noah, I don't know that I'm convinced, but I will say this, very well defended.
Yes.
Outstanding.
Very good.
I just want to say thank you again to our judges, and I'm really proud of all you boys for
Yes.
coming to the task, like writing the paper, defending your papers, and answering questions. I know that was probably nerve-wracking and difficult at times up here when you're in the spotlight like that, based on something that you might believe in your research. So good job to all of y'all. Thank you to all the parents, like for all the stress that we've dealt with. But yes, thank you.
Judges, don't leave. I want to get pictures of the boys up here, and then I want pictures of y'all with the boys. And just know there's 2 of these boys sitting here. We're gonna need y'all in 2 years. We will let y'all know the date, okay? Don't go too far. We're gonna do this again. Boys,